The following is a paid program, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent the opinions of the management of this station or Pamel Broadcasting. And the views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, and callers of this program are solely their own. They do not represent or reflect the views, policies, or official position of ACA, its affiliates, or its staff. ACA does not endorse any statements made during this broadcast. This is 1 in 31 Autism Today, a presentation from Anderson Center for Autism. 1 in 31 Autism Today is a weekly show devoted to autism spectrum disorder.
Good morning and welcome to 1 in 31 Autism Today. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, Chief Development Officer at Anderson Center for Autism. And on behalf of Anderson Foundation for Autism, we are bringing you this podcast this morning. Our guest today is Tiffany McDowell from Joy Bar Coffee Company in North Carolina. Is that correct?
Yes, High Point, North Carolina.
Hi, Tiffany. It's nice to have you with us. All right. Well, we're going to talk about coffee. We're going to talk about your company. But I'd like to start by just asking you to tell us a little bit about who you are and your background.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I'm the proud big sister of Mallory, which is really what I think I'm known online for, is Mallory's sister, although sometimes she is confused to be my daughter, which is offensive to me because we're only 6 years apart. So either she looks really young, which is what I lean towards, or I look really old. So Mallory was born in 1989. I was 6.5 years old. And really that is where our story began. It's some of my earliest memories have been being an advocate for someone with disabilities. And it's been a lifelong journey for me, not just for my sister who has Down syndrome, but for especially adults who have disabilities. It's evolved over the years because we lost our mom, Mallory's senior year of high school. So I really stepped into true sibling caregiving. Mallory lives with me, so I am her power of attorney. I help her navigate life through supported decision-making. And I realize there are a lot of adults with disabilities out there that don't have the same support network that Mallory has. So my heart has just always been, I really advocate for the people who don't have the voice in society so that they have equal representation, equal opportunity, equal employment, equal access. So really that's, in a nutshell, that's my story in the advocacy world. I do have 3 daughters. I'm married. Like I said, my sister lives with me. So all of our family life kind of revolves around advocacy. And most recently, it presented itself as the opportunity to own a business. And approximately 30% of my staff have intellectual or developmental disabilities. We're a true competitive integrated employer, and I take a lot of pride in teaching people what that means.
Great background. I loved, and nobody else will get to see this because the visuals that we have are really for us to be able to see each other while we chat today. But I sometimes, when somebody lights up the way you do when you're talking about your sister and your passion and what you do, I always like to try to describe it for the listeners because it just clearly is such a personal thing. Just the how big your smile got, much bigger than when you were talking about the snow. But I think that's wonderful. So really for quite a long time, and as a young sibling, older than your sister, but still young, you were in this sort of caretaking and supportive role for her. And I always love talking to people who have just interesting kind of life stories that are connected to, a real relationship with a family member that then expands. And I see it in all walks of life. Some people write books. Some people start youth programs. Some people become trainers or advocates in their communities. You went the business route, and we're going to talk coffee and everything, and how Mallory and the rest of your employees are doing. And I might ask for some comparisons or things to connect with our program that we run here at Anderson called Autism Supportive Environments, where we have experts that go into community businesses and even into entire municipalities to help them learn how to just do some simple things that can go take their business from feeling exclusive and closed off to feeling very inclusive and welcoming.
I love it.
So we'll talk about employment and what really needs to continue shifting in our whole society to go the direction we know it needs to go.
Absolutely.
But I have one question before we go into all that good stuff. the name, Joy Bar Coffee. Your website is joybarcoffee.com. Social media, just look up Joy Bar Coffee Company. Where did the name come from?
So I've known for a significant portion of my life, I've known that I wanted to own and operate a business that had some level of interaction with the disabled community. And the coffee shop route really evolved over, I'd say, the last 10 years. Like, God really planted this seed in my heart that this was the direction I was going. I've been in corporate America in sales. I was a regional sales director at an aesthetics company, loved it. It was a wonderful job, but it wasn't my calling. Mm-hmm. And so as I was really fleshing out what the next step looked for me to step into this, the name Joy Bar, I can tell I was literally in the shower listening to a podcast, probably a business oriented podcast. And it just dawned on me that I have very visceral feelings about companies that aren't truly competitive, integrated employers putting something in their name that implies they employ people with disabilities or special needs. And so I did not want to advertise that. I wanted it to be a joyful surprise. I wanted people to walk in thinking, hey, this is a cute coffee shop. And then suddenly the person that's delivering their drink to them has a disability, and that connection creates a joyful experience that, quite frankly, I don't think they get in any other business, especially any other, convenient food business, coffee shop, cafe, restaurant. So instead of advertising that we're advocates for people with disabilities, I wanted to make a promise in the name of the business. And so by calling it Joy Bar, it really was my promise to our customers that they would experience something different here when they choose to come inside and do business with us. So Joy Bar is a promise that we've made to our customers that they will have a joyful experience, whether it's the person that's delivering their drink, their interaction with, this isn't just about our disabled employees. This is also our typically abled employees. We all have an obligation to the customer that we're delivering something beyond coffee. And so Joy Bar to me sort of encompassed this it's different here kind of vibe without saying why it's different here.
Which that's so fascinating. It's a great story. And great reasoning, explanation. It makes me really stop and think, what a better way to name your business, because you're not, so many times I think that even for folks like myself who've worked in this field for a long time, I think you get caught up in this idea that you're always sort of highlighting the individuals that we serve. And, we're definitely getting, I think, better in general about not highlighting the disability itself, but the person. Sure. Mm-hmm. But you're going a step beyond that and highlighting the shared experience. And I talk about shared experiences periodically when somebody kind of tells a story like this, because you're representing, the name of your company is representing the experience of the employees, regardless of who they are, the experience you obviously have from running it and starting it, the experience of the customers. And we're going to get into this because I have some questions about what has been the reaction and the experience of the community members, and maybe even other business owners who you're connected to in your life. And that is truly a shared experience, because what you're doing is you're saying we're not all having the same experience, but we're making a promise that it's going to be joyful no matter what type of experience you're having. Are you the customer? Are you serving? Are you getting a paycheck? It's great on many levels. So I appreciate.
And I will say, on the flip side of that, the other part of what I want to do is to teach other business owners that you don't have to be a charity to do good work, to do this work. We're 100% for profit. I pay all the taxes. I'm not a nonprofit, not because I don't think that's a noble avenue, but because I don't think it's necessary for me. And especially if I want to teach, the restaurant next door or the bank across the street, all of these companies that operate as corporations like we do, there's nothing special that you need to file or operate as in order to consider employing someone who has a documented intellectual or developmental disability. So I feel like if I'm not advertising that in my name, just like, a normal business doesn't advertise anything about its employees in their name, I feel like it's opening the door to them considering doing exactly what I've done. And that's simply expanding who you would consider for employment. And in this case, for us, it's a very significant part of the population that has a very high unemployment rate that wants to work, shows up to work, and loves to work.
Exactly. And it can feel overwhelming and intimidating too, because you can talk yourself out of it because there must be hoops I have to go through or some extra certification or anything. And actually what it really comes down to, I was mentioning before, is often making a few very conscious, thought out choices when you're designing your spaces, when you're training your staff, and when you're doing things like putting together a schedule or figuring out a break room space or levels of supervision and how to communicate what you need as an employee.
Even
which we do in any business, right?
For everybody. Yeah, you have to, in order to operate, for anybody. I think that concept of universal design has benefited us. The first example is we promoted a gentleman who has autism from what we call experience facilitator, which is like front of house, delivering drinks, cleaning tables, writing notes on cups, to cashier. So a very active, interactive role. Well, originally we had them writing the orders on with a Sharpie on a plastic cup. Well, for this specific employee, it was very overwhelming to listen, type in, and write. And so we opted to purchase a label maker. So as he's keying it in, it prints off kind of like when you go to Chick-fil-A, the little stick thing that goes on your cup. And so he didn't have to write it. He literally just had to key it in and then grab the correct cup, and it made it so much easier for him. Well, for other employees, they love it as well because that experience is also overwhelming for a typically abled person. So that universal design of a label benefited all employees, not just our employees with disabilities.
I think that's a great example. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to dive into that a little bit more in terms of what you're seeing, what you start out, focusing on supporting the disabled folks who work with you or differently abled folks who work for you. I would think you're going to have lots of examples of how everybody is responding positively to that, both other employees as well as your customer and community base. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with 1 in 31 Autism Today, and we will be right back.
Stand Up to Cancer asked leading cancer researchers to speak about why they do their work.
2 words come to mind for me. One is responsibility. The other is purpose.
It's just so inspiring to do research that impacts human lives.
Stand Up to Cancer has been a critical partner in advancing research for cancer.
Cancer research saves lives.
So please help us fight in this battle against cancer.
Be a part of the team that ends cancer at standuptocancer.org.
What are you doing out there?
Come on!
I saw you at the game the other night. Yeah, you. Up there getting mad, acting like we're all out there making $1 million a game. But let me be real with you. This isn't the pros. It's school sports, and it's a game, our game. So please, let us play.
School sports fans, remember, when you cheer for your team, make noise for the right reasons. This message presented by the NFHS and the NIAAA.
And all student athletes in New York.
And now, 1 in 31 Autism Today continues on 100.7 WHUD. This is a weekly community affairs presentation from the Anderson Center for Autism.
Back to 1 in 31 Autism Today, podcast on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. Today I'm talking with Tiffany McDowell, who owns, founds, runs, you have all those roles, right? CEO, president of Joy Bar Coffee Company, located in North Carolina. You have 2 locations, Tiffany, right?
We do.
Okay. And you can probably find all that information and quite a bit more on their website, which is joybarcoffee.com, or on social media. Just look up Joy Bar Coffee Company and you'll find them there. I had said to you before we started this conversation, Tiffany, that we weren't going to go into the very detailed history of how you came to purchase this business, only because the story is so beautifully told on High Point Discovered, which is, I think, a blog with some beautiful pictures. It's got some great pictures of you and your family, you and Mallory, your space, which is beautiful. But I would encourage people to go check that out because it does really nicely kind of lay out the whole story, because what I took away from that story anyway, was that through what you've done with the business, which has a tremendous amount of personal and professional purpose. You've continued to stay engaged with the former owners and I think made a stamp in your community in terms of what's possible as a sustainable for-profit business in North Carolina and certainly beyond. So I would encourage listeners to go check that out and read the rest of the story. Before we went into the break, though, you were talking about, you have a great example of a label maker really being game changing for an employee who might have otherwise said, I can't do this job, or I don't want to do this job, or even just had kind of, one of those really stressful experiences that sometimes, whether you're typically abled or differently abled, for any of us, it can sometimes be the end of a job, because you might get so frustrated that you walk out that day and you just don't want to come back. So the label maker worked for this individual. It worked for your other employees. I wonder if you could share some stories about what has the reaction been and the response been from your customer base and from the rest of the community in terms of coming in and getting coffee and having joy.
I've always been very passionate about the idea that customers vote with their money. We're a for-profit, so we have bills to pay, we have employees to pay. We have reason that we need to make a profit and keep our lights on. So when I had really first come up with this concept, we're not the first coffee shop to employ people with disabilities, to be clear. This is not necessarily a novel concept that only we have presented, but I think teaching the public about competitive integrated employment has really differentiated us from anybody else. I'm so passionate about advocating for people like my sister, yes, but I'm also very passionate about them being paid, them having equal opportunity. It's so much more than just letting them be seen in society. It really is about teaching society how to pull them in, how to interact with them. So there's kind of two sides to that. There's our employees who, baristas tend to be very young. A significant portion of our employees are still in college. So these people may not have been exposed to volunteering with, Special Olympics or with anything that would expose them to interacting with someone who's different from them. And so this oftentimes is the first place where they've been faced with, okay, my typical communication style does not necessarily work with this individual, but we always assume positive intent. And so if there's a gap, we have to figure out how do we operate so that both of us are thriving on shift. So I think for our employees, it's been a tremendous learning opportunity, especially at a young age, that I hope they take with them into their next job. I think part of what we're doing, yes, I want to show other businesses they can do what we do, but I also want to teach the employees who are likely going to go work for other companies as they graduate from college and get professional degrees, that they have this experience from when they were in college or, when one of their first jobs, where they really benefited from working on shift with a fellow employee who thinks differently, who processes differently, who, delivers on tasks differently, so that they can possibly convince a future employer that, hey, this was good for the bottom line. This was also good for fellow employees, for all of the reasons. So I think that I see more and more. We just celebrated 3 years of owning a coffee shop, and for me, stepping away from corporate America to do owner operator full time. And I think that's really one of the first fruits of our labor that I'm seeing. Second to that is, and this is in our bio on our website, I mentioned it a lot when we're interviewed, is really teaching our customers how to interact with people who have disabilities. It's simple, it's caring enough to say more than thank you, to have a brief conversation, because those things are so meaningful for someone who typically doesn't get spoken to as much as the rest of us in the typically able community. And I think watching that interaction as they're being delivered their drink and our employees are telling them, I hope you enjoy your drink. I hope you'll come back and see us. Watching customers take a little bit more initiative to have a true conversation with our employees, I think we're also training society how to interact with people that they may not interact with on a normal day. So it's been 3 years. We're still in business. So that's, I think that's
a very positive
people are
sign.
voting for us with their dollars. But I feel like I'm so passionate about our mission that I think we can teach every person involved. Like, even if you don't own a business, you can make a significant impact just by figuring out ways to include someone in your life, in your day, in your community that, you know, they're easily overlooked because they tend to be tucked away and they tend to be very quiet. Like, how can we pull them in and make them valuable contributors to what we do day in and day out?
I think you've nailed it. I think it's not just one person or one part of the experience. That's why I brought up shared experience before. It's really paying attention to and encouraging change and flexibility and opportunities to try different ways of interacting with people, with everybody who's part of that shared experience. I love what you said about, you know, you're absolutely right. The people who are differently abled, and, you know, whether they are on the autism spectrum or have Down syndrome or are dealing with another challenge of whatever kind, are often just not as directly engaged in conversation as neurotypical individuals are. And that's probably overlooked way more than I'm even sort of realizing in this moment. Also, combined with that, you know, cell phones, screens, and the fact that just overwhelmingly as a society, we are all starting to, like, we've been all backing off of actual human interaction for a long time, you know, and sitting, and especially in a place like a coffee shop, sitting and getting your coffee and then being on your laptop or being on your phone and just not making eye contact with anybody. This is what I meant before about, I bet you're having an impact in more ways than you even initially may have set out to do. Because the best way to kind of interrupt that kind of, I'm just going to zone out or super zone in on this game or this, you know, this social media app or whatever it is and scroll, is to actually have somebody say something to you that's like, I hope you come back and visit, or how do you like your drink? It like snaps you out of that. So I love that you're training your staff to do that, and that's what they want to do, and that you're having such success so far. I think I really, you know, I wish we were closer, because I would love to come in for a cup of coffee. But I would encourage, you know, I think this is a great time to just encourage people to get to know what you're doing. Again, not because you're the only one doing it, but certainly you're doing it with a really positive mindset and a lot of experience in the corporate world, which certainly goes a long way. But as a reminder also that if you run a business, or if you're thinking about how can I go back to my employer and kind of make some of these suggestions, there are models out there and you can get to know them. And I would assume, just from talking to you, Tiffany, that you're happy to maybe talk to people who want to learn more or want to, you know, share their idea with you and see if you have thoughts. So if there's a way to reach you, you know, through social media, I would encourage our listeners to just do that. And really, congratulations to you and to Mallory and to everyone on your team for taking this on and for showing people that it's possible.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
This is 1 in 31 Autism Today, and I want to thank Tiffany McDowell from Joy Bar Coffee Company for being our guest today. It was really a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise.
This is Eliza Bozensky, Chief Development Officer at Anderson Center for Autism, and remember, Anderson cares.
You've been listening to 1 in 31 Autism Today, a weekly presentation from Anderson Center for Autism. Join them for another edition of the show next weekend.